person's battery isn't charged up very much, so to speak. They don't have very much internal adaptability. It's kind of like a sailboat that no matter which way the wind turns, they can move the sails and they're going to be able to sail anywhere they want. But if that sailboat is stuck with only about, say, a certain degree limitation of movement and it can't move the sails freely, they're only going to be able to sail around the lake part way, right? Or it's going to be really inefficient. And so that's like this, that your system just doesn't have the adaptability to change to constantly changing conditions in your environment. And so that person is going to have one, lower energy, and two, they're not going to be able to recover as well from stress. And so this tells how your body's ability is going to be to respond adequately to stress. The second thing it tells us, you notice this center line here, and this white dot is over here. In this case, that means that this person is in fight or flight. That the nerve signals, called the sympathetic nerves, going to speed their heart, are way more active than the nerve signals, called the parasympathetics, to slow their heart. And so the person's stuck in fight or flight. So that's like going down the street in first gear, but your RPM is revved up. You're trying to go someplace, but you're stuck in first gear, or you're just stuck with the gas pedal on, so to speak, and you can't shut that gas pedal off. So even at night when you're trying to sleep, your gas pedal is still on. And so the person that's stuck over there, they're not going to be able to repair properly during sleep, for example. And so that's the test heart rate variability. And so we do that with each of our new patients. Now, we have brain injuries and have a lot of fatigue. I just saw a guy yesterday, had a car wreck a year ago, and he still has a lot of fatigue. So brain injuries interfere with the brain in a way that fatigue is often a part of their life unless they get the right kind of help. Now, some of the cool things we can do even for these injuries is get reparative factors in the body to restore the nervous system, and then we can actually train the brain for greater efficiency. So back in the corner over there is we have a neurofeedback unit. And what neurofeedback does is it's like spring cleaning for our brain, in that, well, let's just go back. So neurofeedback helps our brain function more efficiently and effectively. So a couple sensors go on our ears and a couple on our scalp, and it's reading the electrical activity of our brain, but it doesn't put anything into our brain. It doesn't tell our brain or force our brain to do anything, but it does give it information. So it's reading the electrical activity of the brain. Each brain wave, that computer knows when it jumps off track, and it interrupts the sound and the music that you're listening to. So you're listening to really relaxing music, just kind of chilling out music, and you hear these little clicks in there, and it's the music stopping for just a split second. But what each of those clicks is telling your brain is that it just did something. And then it learns from that information to be more stable and effective. So the analogy that we give to patients is, think about driving down Interstate 24 out here, and you get off on the bumper strips on the right and they're rattling and making noise. Well, what does that tell you? If you want to stay in your lane, it tells you to move back in your lane, right? If you want to pull off the side of the road, you still can, but either way, the bumper strips tell you that you've moved position, that you're in that space. And so the neurofeedback is just like that. As soon as your brain shifts lanes, it interrupts the sound for a split second, and your brain begins to learn from that, and it learns to be more stable and efficient. It can just write itself into being more stable. As the brain is more stable, it wastes less energy neurologically. And so a person might even benefit from their sleep or their fatigue issues in that way. And so that's the brain training issue. Then remember our diagram of the hypothalamus in the beginning. We had the immune system up over here. We had the biochemistry and hormones down here. We had the spinal and nervous system input here. And then the fourth quadrant, we had emotions. Our emotional processing centers feed into that hypothalamus. So it's a great book I have on my shelf, and I don't subscribe to every thing in there from a philosophical point of view. But the title of the book is Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And so feelings buried alive, they don't die. They just come back and do these things to us. They burn up our brain chemicals. They throw off the hypothalamus, pituitary adrenal axis and affect our energy. They use up excessive levels of nutrients, so we just burn through our nutrition, our B vitamins and other nutrients. And they cause us to waste all this energy in the muscles. And so on our scans, we'll see all kinds of heat imbalances and increased muscle activity. And so emotions that aren't processed are going to affect us in some way or another, and they're usually going to affect our energy. And so if I just had no passion for this subject or no passion about this at all, how good would my energy be? It wouldn't be very good. I'd be talking to you like this and can't wait for the thing to get over, right? But and even though I had a little bit of a cold in the last day or two, I really love talking about this and I really love doing this, and so that ramps up my energy because of that mind-body connection, right? So those emotional processing centers are feeding into the hypothalamus, into that central processing unit. So our emotions are a big factor of our energy as well. And one of the cool things that we can do is actually when I'm checking patients, I can sometimes sense that there's an emotional component to their problem. I'll have them think of a certain stress or think of a certain word or things like that, and I'll adjust while they're thinking of that, and I'll actually break that connection between the thought and their nervous system reacting. Now, it doesn't take away any memories or thoughts, but it breaks the connection. It severs the connection so that their nervous system is no longer reacting negatively to that thought. It's some of the most cool stuff in the world. When I first got into working with this, I had a dear lady, she just passed away a year ago, that when her kids were young, there was some abuse in the home, and she didn't believe the kids, and then she found out like 10 years later or 15 years later something that was actually true, and then she carried all this guilt. And so every time as an adult she'd go to see her kids, she'd be like this. She'd have to come in like 2 or 3 times to get an adjustment that week because she was dreading seeing her kids with all the guilt going on in her head. And then after she'd get back seeing her kids, she'd be like this again. And so we started working with her with some of these thoughts and some of these feelings and some of these emotions. And even though she'd had multiple years of counseling and Christian counseling and psychologists and all that stuff, she still was reacting that way on a neurological level. She was tightening up every time she would think these thoughts. And so we were able to, over a course of a time, break most of those connections, and then she was able to go visit her kids, and like she didn't have to come in and get any extra adjustments before she went, and she didn't have to come in and get any extra adjustments after she came back because she no longer had these stress responses. We were able to help that through these neuroemotional techniques. So that's some really cool stuff. And this, I just threw this in because we don't think about it, but electromagnetic stress is a huge factor. But since we can't see it, we're not as conscious of it. In my other, it's not here in my computer, but in my other room, I've got what's called a Gauss meter, and I can hold it up right in front of this computer right here where the central processing unit for the computer is, and this Gauss meter will squat to show that there's electromagnetic field there. But when we're in front of electromagnetic fields all day, we're sitting at a computer typing or doing our thing all day, that can actually fatigue us, especially if we're sensitive to that. And so there's ways that we can strengthen our body or help reduce some of these fields, at least the effects of the fields on the body. I just had an amazing instance where electromagnetic stress was a big factor for somebody, and they so anyway, this kid had had learning problems, and he was speaking words incorrectly and out of order and so forth, and nobody could really figure out what's going on with him. I think they told him it was educational autism or something. I don't even know if that's such a true thing or not. But he had language processing areas, and when I checked him, I'm not going to go into all the ways we figured this out, but I said to the mom, is he sleeping with a cell phone charging near his head or the Wi-Fi really close to his bedroom? She said both. She had her phone charging about 18 inches from his head, and the Wi-Fi transmitter was right across the wall from his bed. So I told her we have to change that, and she was willing enough for me to listen to me and do that. So her husband's a medical physician, and she said he's the definition of the word skeptic. So she didn't tell him that she was bringing him to me to start with. But after he noticed that the boy was doing so much better with his homework and that he was communicating better, he said, I'm talking about the physician, he said to his wife, and this is a physician in town here, he said to his wife, what are you doing with I'm not going to name the boy, but what are you doing with my son here? And she said, well, I brought him to Dr. Winters, and he found that electromagnetic fields were actually affecting his brain, and so that's why I've been shutting off the Wi-Fi at night, and I've moved my phone. And so he was impressed because he saw the difference that is made for the kid. So the kid is actually learning better now, and even doing some better communication than he was. Well, before that lady left on that visit, I actually found a study that was done in China where they put a high electromagnetic field near a person, and then they measured certain areas of the brain with what's called a functional MRI scanner. So an MRI scanner that allows them to see metabolic activity. And they found that in this high field environment, that the area of the brain that is the language processing centers was affected. And that's the case for this kid. So you tell me that these fields aren't real and that they can make a difference. They really do. And like I said, this was with a physician here in town and their family. Well, I've done something. Let's see here. Give me a second, see if I can recover this here. So just a couple of things on good sleep habits. Again, we want to get to bed by 10 if possible, unless we're a shift worker or we have a odd shift, but by 10 if possible, because that keeps us in our biological rhythms of sleep and wake and so forth. We want to avoid bright light, especially from computer screens before bed. I just heard from my eye doctor that they now have a blocking capacity that they can put in your eyes for blue light, which I think is going to be pretty cool because it's hard to stay off all screens after 8 in the evening. But that blue light goes into the brain and in effect decreases melatonin production, and that affects our sleep. So we want to get away from clocks and other sources of EMFs away from the head. So I'm not saying don't have a clock in your room, but if you have a clock in your room, don't have it by your head within a couple of feet of your head. That's going to be an electromagnetic field that's going to affect your head and your brain, and it's going to decrease melatonin production for one thing. So all those things are going to affect melatonin production. So we've talked about a lot of things tonight. So how do we sort out those issues? How do we sort out if it's an immune issue, if it's a hidden infection? How do we sort out if it's a biochemistry problem, it's a hormone problem? How do we sort out if it's a spinal problem? And how do we sort out if it's emotions being involved? And so the way that we do that, of course, is with an exam. But with the first thing to start that exam is we do a functional questionnaire. So you see on the left this questionnaire, and it says thyroid 39 points, nutritional deficiencies 36, heavy metals 36, female hormones 34 points. And so this is a questionnaire of about 300 different questions, and when you're taking it, it doesn't give you the categories, but when it scores it and then sends me the report, it gives me these categories, and I can see these are the areas we might need to start looking. So for this person, thyroid might be a place we might need to look, heavy metals might be a place we need to look, nutritional deficiencies or hormone issues. And so it'll guide me where to start looking. Then we will actually test reflex points on the body, and these come from acupuncture and Chinese medicine, so we can take a good strong muscle and we can touch one of these reflex points, and energetically the loop is off if that energy is off at that point, and the muscle won't be able to lock anymore. It's not that it's not so much a strength contest, it's a matter of whether the muscle locks or not. So I could take an Olympic weightlifter, and if I touch the right point, they won't be able to lock their muscle. And so I'll know which energy points are weak, and then I'll compare that to the questionnaire, and I'll have a really good idea where I need to be looking. I need to be looking at heavy metals, nutrient deficiencies, hormone problems, thyroid issues. I'll know, I'll have already started steering my exam and my thinking process to how we're going to help this person. And so that's how we begin to sort these things out. And so one of our testimonials, did any of you watch this one, the Veda? And so she was sleeping 16 to 20 hours a day on the weekends just to try to get enough energy to go back to work on Monday. So during the week, she'd work all day, come home, plop on the couch, go to sleep way early, and not have any extra energy to do anything. And literally 16 to 20 hours on the weekend, she was just trying to recover herself just to be able to push through. And so that's not a very fun life. And so she'd been that way for a while, and as she talks about on the video, she didn't really get any help out of the conventional medical model. So when she saw us, one of the things I picked up through that questionnaire and through some of the reflex testing was that she probably had a heavy metal issue. And so she had a mouthful of mercury amalgams, or fillings that contain mercury, and she had other histories of heavy metal exposures, and that's one of the areas that we started working on her. Anyway, she's got such a great testimonial. Can you imagine sleeping 16 to 20 hours a day all weekend just to try to be able to force yourself back to work on Monday? I mean, it's not very fun. And so sorting this out, we were able to know where to go and where to start working, and she had amazing recovery. So what we do is if you're interested in getting checked by us, we do a male or female specific health history. So there's a different history for men versus women. And then we do this functional assessment questionnaire. We do 300 questions that you're going to take, and that's going to help us sort out whether there's thyroid issues or adrenal issues or heavy metal issues. And then we'll look at any labs or records that you've had in the last 2 years. Again, sometimes I'll look at those a little bit more from a functional perspective, from a health perspective, instead of just from a disease perspective. And so sometimes a bit of a difference in how we'll look at those versus your physician. Then you'll have a consultation with me. We'll do this heart rate variability scan. Remember, that's where you have your hand on the meter and it's measuring the timing between the beats of your heart, and that's going to show how well your battery's charged and if it's stuck in fight or flight or not. And then we'll check that spinal muscle scan with the computer, and that'll show us if you're wasting energy in your muscles. And then we'll do some neurological exams, some balance of the brain side to side. We'll have you doing some different tests, finger to nose, things like that, to see what the balance is in your brain in the right side versus left side. And that actually can make a difference as well. We'll check your posture, your spinal movement. We'll see where you're at posture-wise. We'll check these organ reflex points, and then we can often do a body composition, which will show how well you're burning fat and how well you're burning energy from a metabolic point of view. So how many would like to know how they're doing? Yeah. To feel better, we got to know how we're doing, because if we don't know how we're doing, how can we get a game plan to help us, right? So it's a 10-point consultation and exam, and that is really where we start to turn these people around. So can you imagine Devade if she just stayed that way, sleeping 16 to 20 hours a day on the weekend? That's crazy. And so now, I think she just retired last month, but she can enjoy traveling. In fact, she's going to
Is it Africa?
Kenya or Africa for like a 3-week, it's not a mission trip, just a 3-week visit to Africa to enjoy seeing Africa. So that's one thing that she can do, because she feels a lot better. So anyway, we do this 10-point consultation exam. It's normally $180 if you want to sign up to get that exam, and that's covering all those 10 points. It's $68, and that's just something that we've offered at our talks for years. And so if that's something you're interested in, then you'll see Jamie or you'll see Karen. So